I realized that my purpose in this world, and I think hopefully I would suggest all of our purposes in this world, is to make the burden of living in this world less onerous, less painful, to decrease the suffering of others. And when we focus on that, what could be more life affirming? What could fundamentally be more important to our existence on this earth?
So thanks for coming, Dr. Doty. How are you doing? How's your morning going so far?
Just peachy.
That's great. I just want to start by saying you're very interesting to me, so I'm very much looking forward to this.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, we'll find out, I suppose. Also, in doing research and prep for today, I heard that, or read that, I guess, that one of your superpowers is your willingness to speak with anybody. So
obviously we're talking.
That's what I was going to say. I hope I don't make you come to regret it.
No.
In prepping, I read your last two books, Into the Magic Shop and then Mind Magic. And I was struck by two particular things. One is you really know how to start a book. Into the Magic Shop. Well, for people who are listening who haven't read Into the Magic Shop, you drop us right into the middle of a brain surgery on a child that you're doing, and you describe. I mean, it's very compelling. The very first words we read are what you're describing, what the sound of the flesh ripping away from a skull sounds like. I was like, I went to film school and I spent $80,000 to learn to drop people right into the middle of the action, and you know that. And then obviously your more recent book, Mind Magic, you start by telling the reader, truthfully so, the universe does not give a fuck about you. And you go on. And I have to say, Jim, knowing you're friends with the Dalai Lama, my first question with that was, what does your buddy, the Dalai Lama, think about your potty mouth?
Actually, it's funny you say that because not so much the Dalai Lama. And in fact, I know a large number of spiritual and religious leaders, and frankly, they don't give a f. And what I mean by that is that elevated spiritual beings, that's not their focus whatsoever. It's sort of the norms of society. What they're interested when they see a person, and they can intuit this in microseconds, is does this person have a good heart? What are they motivated by? Are they judgmental? Do they accept others? Do they care? Are they compassionate? Those types of topics are on the minds of elevated spiritual leaders. It's not whether you say f or whatever. And it's interesting. I had a woman actually text me when that book came out, and it was on LinkedIn. And she said, I so loved your first book. It was so inspiring. I shared it with everyone. But I have to tell you, when I read the first lines of your new book, I was shocked and appalled. And you used the term, or she said the F word. You used the F word multiple times in that first chapter. I couldn't go on. I could only imagine what it would have been like if I had been playing it on Audible and my children heard it. And she goes on and on about this. And I sent her a text back, actually, that said, to be frank with you, I'm shocked and appalled that you would waste so much time sending me a text from clearly what is a elitist position about some superiority you think you have, when some of the smartest, most intelligent, most thoughtful people I know use profanity frequently. And that is in no way a measure. In fact, oftentimes people use what one would think is complimentary terms in a context which is much, much worse than the F word and many other words. I said, you should spend your time focusing on words like genocide, murder,
Yeah, the
and
profane things, not the profane words. Yes.
exactly. And then I also said, you mentioned your children here. I said, if your children, by the time they're 8 or 9 or 10 years old, have not heard the word, I don't know what world you're living in.
What
And I
rock does she
said,
have them buried under? Yeah.
yes. And so how are they even living in this world? And I said, frankly, I feel sorry for you that you would waste time and not focus your energies on being of service to people, not trying to tear down people or tell them what they should or shouldn't say in regard to a non-issue. But anyway.
Mhm. I just wanted to get your take on it. Personally, I'm with you. It's the profane things, not the profane language. And also, every language and dialect has profanity for a reason. Sometimes that is the word you need and want, and people should be able to use them in expressing themselves. So, yay.
Yeah, and like I said, as you know, I know many of the leading spiritual and religious leaders. And I don't change how I talk to anybody. And so, again, it's just such a sad statement that somebody would go down that path. But
Mhm. The other thing I did want to is I was wanted to introduce is just when I was prepping, your life has a couple of very interesting axes in it from what I've gleaned in reading your books and prepping. You've got sort of a feast famine axis. You know, you were born into poverty in an abusive situation. You became a neurosurgeon. You were CEO of Accuray, which I don't think a lot of people necessarily know what that is, but it does cyberknife, and I think everybody's heard of cyberknife. And then you lost everything and you seem to be doing okay now. So I'm guessing you recovered some. And then the other, so you've got that feast famine axis, but then also as a neurosurgeon who started a compassion center, who's written the books you've got that brain heart axis going on, which is also very interesting. So so I was thinking like, gosh, maybe Jim should have been a cardiologist. How did you choose neurosurgery and how did that evolve into all the heart work, all the heart energy you have now?
well, actually, I have a good friend named Jonathan Fisher, who is a cardiologist and actually has written about some of these topics. But let me just comment on a few things. When people grow up in challenging backgrounds, such as myself, um, frequently, because of that, they do not have the wherewithal, unfortunately, to quote unquote succeed in life. As you know, there's something called adverse childhood experiences, which is a scale whereby you add up were they exposed to mental illness, drug or alcohol abuse, poverty, violence, etc. And the higher that number, the less likely it is for them to succeed by Western societal standards, which typically are associated with money, power, position. And it's very true. The vast majority of children who are exposed to these traumatic or ongoing instability, chaos environments, the less likely they are to succeed. So, one of the first things, of course, is what changed for me was that I walked into a magic shop, and there was a lady there who had a radiant presence that embraced you in a non-judgmental way and made you feel okay, made you feel that you were important, made you feel that your dignity or presence was recognized. And the reality is, giving somebody that gift of recognizing them, not treating them as if they're insignificant or invisible, has a profound effect on many people. Because once you denigrate somebody or don't recognize their dignity or treat them as nobody and they accept that, then they're lost. and it's very hard to overcome that. But before I get into that story, let me just comment that oftentimes children from backgrounds such as my own go in one of two directions. They either give up and then they turn to alcohol or drugs, or they develop mental illness, or they become overachievers. And of course, obviously, I chose the latter path. Um, and then, though, once you're on that path, there's another bifurcation. And that bifurcation is one, you sit there and say, nobody helped me. I did it on my own. Therefore, I have no obligation, nor do I care to help anybody else. And of course, this is a very selfish I attitude. Conversely, which I think is actually the correct attitude, because nobody succeeds in life without the help of others, is to have gratitude and appreciation for all the people who reached out, helped you succeed, promoted you, and that is through compassion, kindness, acceptance, caring, love. And so, from my own perspective, and perhaps I'm on an extreme, is I appreciate that reality. I cherish that reality, and I try to practice that. And so that is, if you will, sort of the heart centered approach that I take when I look at the world. Everybody is suffering to some degree, whether wealthy or poor. Everyone has struggles. Oftentimes, the actions people take actually have no reflection on the event at hand. It has to do with the baggage that they carry with them. And when you understand that and you don't immediately judge people, it allows you actually to see them through a different lens and to appreciate that there may be something else at hand and not to respond immediately to someone's perhaps negativity. And this is the idea that Viktor Frankl, if you will, promotes with this idea of uh, uh, between every event and a response to the event, there is a pause, and within that pause lies your freedom. And it's understanding that and learning to emotionally regulate and take the time to reflect before you immediately respond. And of course, if people did that more often, there would be few, if any, conflicts in this world. But getting back to the story at hand, uh, so in this magic shop, it turned
Ruth,
out
we can
that,
talk. I know. Ruth. We all know Ruth if we've read your books.
yes, Ruth. Ruth was the owner's mother, and she knew nothing about magic, which of course was my interest. But we began a conversation, and she asked a lot of questions. And in this particular instance, I answered them truthfully versus hiding my shame and insecurity by making stuff up or lying. And from that, after 20 or 30 minutes, she said to me, I really like you. If you come in every day, I'm going to be here for the next 6 weeks. I think I could teach you something that could really help you. And of course, I was 12. I was poor. I had no knowledge. But the reality was, I had nothing else to do. And she was giving me chocolate chip cookies. So I did show up every day for 6 weeks. And she taught me two things. One was what we would now call a mindfulness practice, because I did not appreciate that my childhood was one of constant trauma, very similar to what soldiers experience with the uncertainty and chaos of war. And oftentimes it results in post traumatic stress disorder, which can be devastating. And this is, of course, is the reason why many children from these environments don't succeed in life. Uh, so the first thing she taught me was, if you will, how to recognize that my muscles were all tense and how to relax them. And this is commonly now called a body survey. And from there, she taught me a practice to focus, in this case, focusing on a candle. Because if you're not able to focus, it's hard to be present, it's hard to attend, and it's hard to learn if you're constantly looking around all the time because you never know what's going to happen next. And the other critical things that she taught me, which, although taught in present day mindfulness, but not explicitly, was the concept of self compassion and not responding to the negative dialogue or being distracted by it, but more importantly, giving yourself positive affirmations. And then from there, recognizing that when you're hypercritical of yourself, you have a tendency to be hypercritical of everyone around you. So that was really the first gift she gave me. And the second gift, from which actually the second book arose, was this concept of visualization or manifestation.
How do you, one of the things I was curious about is that manifestation for a lot of people who are seeking information on it, who are watching YouTube videos, getting on the books, doing The Secret or Law of Attraction, all that, in some ways seems a bit at odd with compassion.
Well, of course it
And
is. You're right.
okay, so how are we going to square this circle? Where I mean, I will say, a couple of weeks ago, I had an interview with a guy, Joe Gallenberger from the Monroe Institute, and the thing that really came out of that interview is that manifestation starts in the heart. Was what he was saying, that you can't, if you don't have that, the love energy, a universal love energy, has to be there. So I don't know how where what your take is on that, because I know also as a neurosurgeon you have really explained in your books about what the where the subconscious mind and brain wiring figures into how you can manifest and what your responses are to things.
Well, I think your statement is correct that if you want to have the greatest ability to manifest your intention, it must be, and you could say through the heart. But fundamentally, what you're saying is that you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest system, which is associated with openness, caring, compassion, um, which is actually our natural state of being, versus activating one's sympathetic nervous system, our flight, fight, or freeze response, which of course is a fear response. And so, in some ways, it's a choice between activating the fear response or the love response. And what I mean by that is, I mentioned the paths you can take. The person who takes the path that says, nobody helped me, I did it myself, commonly is the person who is focused on hedonic happiness. And what I mean by that is oftentimes many of these individuals carry the insecurity and shame which they've grown up with. And so what they try to do is they try to become happy, if you will, and I put quotes around that, by the acquisition of things or doing things so that they will get external affirmation that they're okay. And such actions are from insecurity and fear. And of course, hedonic happiness is quite transitory and is very shallow. And the reality is that it will never fill that void of insecurity or shame or fear that one carries. Uh, Conversely, if your actions are out of our natural evolution as a species, And what I mean by that is through the lens of love, connection, caring, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Then you're looking through the lens of not me or I, but looking through the lens of we. And when you activate that system, your cognitive brain networks, your peripheral physiology function at their best. And this is why in Mind Magic, I talk about creating that environment for yourself before you attempt to embed your intentions into your subconscious. So, fundamentally, what we're talking about is how do we activate this concept of eudaimonic happiness, which fundamentally relates to purpose and meaning in one's life. And it's through that mechanism. Because if you focus in towards the us or we, it doesn't imply that you don't get other material things if you want them. It just implies that that should be the lens through which you focus because we have a genetic imperative to care. Now, if you look in my book, Into the Magic Shop, of course, My Time with Ruth, she asked me to make a list of 10 things I wanted. Well, I was 12 years old looking through the lens of poverty. So I asked, I wanted to be a doctor. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't because I didn't care for people, but I wanted the external affirmation of people looking at me and saying, he's a doctor. That means he's important, right? I wanted a mansion. I wanted $1 million, which seemed like a lot of money back then. I wanted a Rolex watch. I wanted a Porsche. And the reality was, I did all those practices that Ruth had taught me in regard to manifestation or visualization, and I did get everything I wanted. But here was the problem. I climbed every mountain to get this external affirmation. And at the top of every mountain, after climbing it, there was nothing there for me. It was hollow. And so here I am in a situation where I've made tens and tens of millions of dollars. I have a penthouse in the top of a building in San Francisco. I have a Ferrari, a Porsche, a Mercedes, a BMW, a Range Rover in my garage. I have a mansion overlooking the ocean in Newport Beach. I have a villa in Florence. I have a private tailor who makes my clothes. I am flying around in private jets and dating beautiful women. And I was never more miserable in my entire life. And I had all my friends, they'll say, God, this is great. You're amazing, dude. Wow. I wish I had that life. But it was a hollow life. And it got me nothing except heartache. And it was only when I lost everything, and we can talk about that if you'd like, that I understood what I had misunderstood or not followed through with in my time with Ruth.
Well, what I have learned as I've gotten older, when I'm thinking I want something, I want to manifest something, is that, and I'm not saying I'm good at this, but I have to ask myself the question is like, well, what's the feeling I want to have? Because it's usually the feeling you're after. You think you're going to feel a certain way about yourself when you have the multiple houses and are on the jet with the hot looking woman. And then you get there. And it's like, if the feeling isn't there, then you haven't really manifested what you were looking for. So so let's though talk about, you're saying that something happened when the market crashed, I guess, and you lost everything. Tell me what that day and the following days were like that changed your perspective, sure. I guess.
Well, let me make two comments before. When we talk about manifesting, all of us are manifesting all the time, but it's like so many other. Yes. It's so many other things. It's like trying to be an elite athlete. You don't become an elite athlete overnight. You may be able to run around the block, but that's far different than running an ultra marathon. So one of the things is to recognize what you're already manifesting, because for many people, every action they take, every decision they make, every partner they choose is based on baggage that they carry, often at a subconscious level, which is the determinant of the decisions they make. So one of the things is, if those decisions obviously are frequently negative, you need to gain insight and self-awareness as to why that keeps happening. The second thing is to understand what you were just mentioning, is the difference between what you think you want and what you actually need. And in some ways, this relates to the hedonic versus eudaimonic happiness. It's common, certainly, to see something. As an example, let's say I'm driving down, the street, and a guy pulls up in a convertible Porsche, and I go, "Oh, God, I really want to be in that car." And then you go, "God, maybe I should go buy one."
You should be thinking, "Been there, done that." That's what you should be thinking.
Yes, but my point is, that is an example, not necessarily reality. But my point is, though, that we all get these urges for things, and it's really often just a brief thing that enters our head. It's like we drive by McDonald's and going, "God, I'd love to have a Big Mac right now." Right now, the sad thing is, Big Macs are not that expensive, and you can just turn into the parking lot, and oftentimes we do. But yeah, it's sort of that sort of feeling. But again, it's very transitory. And so understanding the difference between what you think you want and what you actually need, and what most of us need, is a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning in our lives, because that's what really makes a life. And so focusing on the other gives us that. Now, having talked on many podcasts, I'll get remarks from people. They'll say, "Are you anti-materialistic? That's what it sounds like. You mean I shouldn't enjoy my success?" And that's not what I'm saying at all. Listen, we were just talking about Porsches. Listen, I have two. I live in a multi-million-dollar house. I am very, very privileged on an extraordinary level. But the difference is that, one, I have immense gratitude. But the other is, if all of those things are gone tomorrow, it will have zero impact on how I feel about myself. And that is the big difference, because some people collect these things to have people look at them and tell them how great they are, versus I'm just enjoying them. And I'm enjoying them for the time I have them. But if they're gone, it's perfectly fine. But the other aspect is, when you look through the different lens of being of service, of caring, sort of this we perspective, actually, that creates an environment where you can get all of those things if you so choose. It's not as a one or another choice. The key difference is, though, understanding that what makes you happy doesn't come from external affirmation. It comes from accepting yourself as you are, the good parts, the bad parts, if you will, the shadow self, as Jungians might use the term, and recognizing that in the face of all of that, you deserve love. You're a worthwhile human being, and you're imperfectly perfect.
That self-love nut, though, is a tough one to crack. What but let me back up for a second. So I did want to talk about when you lost everything. I don't know if in some way you consider that you manifested losing everything because you were so miserable. Seems like it was a thing that worked out for you in terms of changing your perspective. So what happened that you were part of this stock market crash? I'm sorry, this was the 2002 crash. Yes.
The 2000 crash, the dot-com crash.
Yeah. Yes. The dot-com crash. So, I'm guessing it was quick and fast news, like a blow for a lot of people, because when the market goes, it happens, it starts to happen, and it really just happens over a couple of days. What were those days like for you, and how did you shift your perspective? First, I'm sure you had a shock experience then.
Well, Yeah, well, again, one of the things I learned is to not have too much attachment. We can talk about that later, but uh, of course, it was a blow. Here, nominally, I'm worth $80 million or so, with potential to be worth a lot more. I borrowed $15 million from a bank because at that time, if you had stock that was publicly traded, even though you had a lockout agreement for a period of time, it was always anticipated that will end and you'll be able to pay back the money.
Mhm.
And clearly, that was not the case. That 80 million went down to a few hundred thousand in about 6 weeks. And of course, there was no way I could pay back that money without liquidating everything. And so
I
during
guess
that,
what Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what I did want to ask is like that when something like that happens, there's your self perception, but you're the one who also has to speak to everyone in your life who looks to you to be a certain way and have certain things, I would suppose, and support in a certain way. That is the part that to me seems that it goes right to your identity in a way of like, who am I now? Am I
well,
wrong?
but that's and that is in some ways what happened. I had maybe identity crisis is the right word, but because again, if you're chasing things for external affirmation and you lose those things and you identify with that as you, of course, now you're nothing. Uh, so what I tell people is during that time frame, two people became my best friends. One was the banker, and one was my lawyer, who I had to deal with to unwind a lot of things. Now, the interesting aspect, because I ended up going down to my home in Newport Beach, this mansion overlooking the ocean, which was now partially empty, was I went through a period of reflection there and sort of trying to understand what the hell happened. And as part of that reflection, I realized that I was self-focused and not focused on actually what Ruth had told me. And that actually sort of was a profound insight. And the other thing after realizing that was that in a conversation with my attorneys, it turned out that they had actually not filed the final paperwork for the transfer of all this stock I had in a company that had yet to go public, which I had been the CEO of, and which I had created this trust, frankly, for tax avoidance purposes, not necessarily to be the greatest guy in the world. Although, obviously, what I was donating to would help people. Uh, so it turned out I could have kept all of that stock and I wouldn't have been broke at all. That company was going to go public. And after this period of reflection, though, and trying to understand, I decided to go ahead and give every bit of that stock away to charity still in the face of this. Now, I talked to all of my friends, advisors, and actually the woman who I was dating at the time, who became my wife. And every one of them said, do not do that.
But
uh,
do you think it had to do something with the fact that we also have our own, you have your own rules about how you can recover and how you can live with yourself. And I'm guessing you had to honor that rule. You knew you would be finished if you didn't listen to that voice or that part of your brain that said, "No, I will honor this because this is who I am and I don't want to speak for you. You finished. I'm
no, no,
sorry."
no, no. You can speak for me. No, I mean, on some level, you're correct. I mean, I had this woman Ruth had changed my life. She'd given me these tools, and I had not understood what she'd told me at that point in time. So, in some ways, giving it all away honored her, and it also, in some ways, honored me. So the reality, of course, is, as you point out, I had a really a truly rags to riches story in terms of uh, finances, but I also had a rags to riches story because of what I did, but it was not related to finances. One was through the lens of financial poverty. The second part, though, is through the lens of spiritual poverty. And what I mean by that was, or is, that I was very self-focused. And when I gave everything away, it changed everything. And what I mean is that it allowed me actually to create the center that I founded at Stanford that focuses on compassion, the neuroscience of compassion. It recentered me. That recentering then allowed me to meet with the Dalai Lama, who at that point, when I started the center, gave me the largest donation he had ever given to a non-Tibetan cause. And this was in our very first meeting. It allowed me to develop a relationship with him and become the chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation for many years. It allowed me to meet Archbishop Tutu. It allowed me to meet Thich Nhat Hanh. It allowed me to meet Pope Francis, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, Sadhguru, Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Radhanath Swami. And how many people have the opportunity to meet some of the leading spiritual and religious leaders and become friends with them, or advisors, or spend time with them, or to absorb their wisdom? And that ultimately is the true success story. That is the rags to riches second story. And as a result of that, my perspective changed. And I realized that my purpose in this world, and I think hopefully I would suggest all of our purposes in this world, is to make the burden of living in this world less onerous, less painful, to decrease the suffering of others. And when we focus on that, what could be more life affirming? What could fundamentally be more important to our existence on this earth? Because this allows you to become a fully actualized human being. Sadly, you see people who have been brainwashed by the narrative of Western capitalist society, which is one of conspicuous consumption, ever increasing spending, as if by doing so, that is going to help you in terms of living a life of worth. All it does is demean you. And so the sad thing is, you have people who come to this country from third world countries where some of the greatest wisdom traditions have developed, and they give that away to live in a society that does not value that whatsoever. And they're unhappy because the streets are not paved with gold. It's as harsh or more harsh often for many of those people. The other side of the coin is you see people who've had extraordinary quote unquote success, and they have access to everything, everything. They can do anything, and they're unhappy and they're bored. And they don't become more generous when they have more things. They become more selfish. They become less kind because, in their view, everybody is replaceable. Everybody is only worth anything to me in the context of what they get from them. And sadly, they create a echo chamber by hanging around with the same unhappy, diseased people who are spreading this narrative and who only make themselves more unhappy by not caring.
Yeah. Well, it is the illusion, I guess, of being in a physical body where everything looks real and it looks like this is it, right? I mean,
Exactly.
I've discussed this with other people recently, just the problem of being incarnate, where just from the start, you are in a body that is needy. Like, it needs to be within a temperature range of about 10 degrees, and it needs to eat, and it needs to be rested, and it makes you a hungry spirit in some ways. I did want to follow up though on, you giving away, continue, honoring your stock pledge. there's you write about the fact that the reward centers in the brain light up when you give things away, when you're generous that way. I don't think people
That is
know
true.
enough about that.
Well, the reality is that, and this goes back to our evolution as a species, is that unlike other species, our species require us to be cared for at least a decade or a decade and a half, which is a huge requirement in regard to time and resources. Well, why would you do that? Especially, as I said, there are many species, they just run off into the forest or the jungle and they do just fine. The reason is that our evolution has created a genetic imperative for us to expend that time and resources because when we do so, we're rewarded. And we're rewarded by the release of various neurotransmitters. And many people are familiar with oxytocin or the love hormone or the affiliation hormone or the caring hormone. And when that is activated, your pleasure and reward centers are stimulated. You feel good when you care. And of course, this evolved not only in regard to the nuclear family, but in regard to the tribal system that also kept us alive. We survived for millions of years in groups of 50 to 150 to live in a harsh environment. And in that environment, we were attuned to the suffering of others, the needs of others, because without them, the tribe could not survive. And so we have a deep, deep caring instinct that motivates us, makes us feel good, and actually, as I mentioned earlier, allows our brain cognitive networks to function at their best, our peripheral physiology to function at its best, and it's even associated with an increase in longevity. So, this is how we're meant to live. In ancient times, these events that cause threat were quite temporary and were not that frequent. Unfortunately, the nature of modern society, unlike in ancient times where you grew up in a village or a tribe, people knew you from birth to death. The tribe was your family. It protected you, it encouraged you, it corrected you. And in the face of all of that, you still felt good about yourself. You felt that you were in an environment where people loved you. And this is why the work of Dan Buettner with the Blue Zones, or you look at the Harvard study that's now led by Robert Waldinger, which has been going on for 85 years, is the reality that you function best, or what allows you to live the longest, is caring for others, having deep relationships. And in modern society, we don't have that. We don't have our relatives frequently close to us. We're certainly not living with them in most cases by the nature of how people move around for jobs. You don't have friends everywhere. And as a result, also magnified by social media, you're highly judgmental, you're insecure, you're afraid. And of course, this chronically activates our stress response or our sympathetic nervous system, and which actually is not healthy for us. And so, if you wish to manifest, the best way to do it and to increase the likelihood of you manifesting your intentions is to be in a relaxed, calm state, and you embed your intention into your subconscious through our sensory organs, which actually creates our identity, if you will. We have about 6 to 10 million bits of information incoming every second, but we're only able to process 50 to 100 at a conscious level. When you focus your attention on your goal to manifest and you consciously embed that into your subconscious, and the way you do that is use your sensory organs as well. As an example, you use your tactile response, you write your intention down or your goal. You read it silently using your eyes. You read it aloud so you hear it. You visualize it in your mind. The more you do that, the more likely it is going to be embedded into your subconscious. And this is why, as a child, I would literally do this practice probably well over 100 times a day, over and over again, because we know that habit formation, or the creation of neural pathways, is through repetition. What fires together wires together.
Has been said, yes.
Yes, yes. And so once you're able to do that, this activates, and this is associated with mind wandering or daydreaming, our default mode network, which is associated with self-reference, or the creation of a narrative about who we are. And then once that is embedded there, this activates our task positive network, which is associated with three cognitive brain networks: your salience network, your attention network, and your executive control network, or it can be called the central executive network. But uh, once those are activated, this is where the magic happens. Something has to become salient to you. Something has to become important to you if it is going to manifest. Once something is important to you, then your attention network is activated, meaning that now you have to allocate cognitive resources to keep your quote unquote eyes open to anything in your environment that may allow that intention to manifest. And it's the goal of the conscious mind to take that information from the subconscious and act upon it. As an example, I'm sure you've been to a party that's noisy, yet if somebody says your name, you turn to it, even though nobody else heard it. Well, the reason is because your identity obviously has been deeply embedded into you, and you're always attuned to that because it could have an effect on you. Conversely, in situations where we frequently use the term synchronicity or coincidence, this is because your subconscious has been turned on and is always looking for situations that might allow your intention to manifest. As an example, a few months ago, I was at a coffee shop, and there's a project I've been working on, which frankly is fairly obscure. Yet above the din of the coffee shop, I hear two people using terminology associated with that project. Well, that's because I was subconsciously had attuned myself to be on alert for that. This resulted in me getting up, introducing myself, becoming friends with these individuals, and now we're working together. That is an example of manifesting. And so this is available to all of us. And sometimes, yes, you can manifest, and you may not be in the right mindset. What I'm saying here is not that if you're not in the right mindset, nothing manifests. What I am saying is if you want to have the greatest likelihood of something to manifest, it's by using the principles that I outlined in the book. And it's also not a statement that everything you wish to manifest is going to manifest. Frankly, your subconscious may prevent something from manifesting because it has sometimes more knowledge than you about what's good for you. Also, it doesn't manifest exactly the same way you may visualize or in the same time frame you want it to manifest. I mean, there are things that I'm still manifesting, and they've been going on between 5 and 15 years. But there is something that I think is important, which is this concept of dispositional optimism. And what I mean by that is that you, regardless of whether it happens in the time frame you want, you have a deep seated belief in the possibility that it will in fact manifest.
Yes. You touched on something that I think is very important, though, that just there's this edge where of possibility. You can manifest probably more than you thought you could manifest if you work on it, but you can't manifest everything. Um, I think there's a little bit of shame for some people when they've been working at whatever they want to manifest and it doesn't happen. It's like a spiral. And again, I mean, there's a lot of since The Secret and Law of Attraction and so many people out there, there are more people who are attuned to what's possible for them, what they can do. But I'm just glad that you kind of put that out there, that not everything is possible. And it could be your subconscious mind knows better. It could be something else sort of in the quantum foam of the world that we don't quite understand. But having the dispositional optimism to understand you that might be in your best interest is
Exactly.
important.
And I think that this gets back to a critical point. Unfortunately, as you well know, there are people who become quote unquote social media influencers who promote this idea of attraction using woo woo and pseudoscience, the law of attraction. And what it does for many people is, as an example, they'll go, I want a Ferrari. I need to have that Ferrari. I'm going to get that Ferrari. There's never mention about what the purpose of getting that Ferrari is, right? It's, I just want it. And this is the fundamental flaw. And when that manifestation fails, then, of course, as you were pointing out, there's guilt that, oh, there's something wrong with me or I didn't do it the right way. No, that's the fundamental fault of this woo-woo of manifestation. And again, if you focus, and I give several examples in the book, on the me, that rapidly decreases the likelihood of you getting what you want. As an example, versus saying, I love Italian sports cars. They're incredible. I'm hoping, and I really want to happen, that I become a doctor, and by helping people, I will be able to enjoy having a Ferrari, which will make me sort of happy at the moment, understanding it's transitory, but I enjoy that. But the goal is really, I just want to be a doctor and have the ability to choose maybe getting that Ferrari. Completely different narratives, completely different ways to activate this manifestation of one's intention. Just to also mention something else I think is important. Some people focus on extraordinarily difficult goals, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. The question, though, is to understand what is driving you to crave or desire that goal. And if you sacrifice every relationship, everything that's important in your life to get to the top of that mountain, and you're standing there alone, what is it that you've really accomplished? It's a Pyrrhic victory, right? You got nothing, even though you sacrificed so much. So I think the other aspect is to have some degree of self-awareness about what's really important and this concept of balance. If it costs you every relationship, which is what makes us human, to attain a goal, then you have done nothing other than to make your life unhappy at the end of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. A good portion of the Journeying Soul podcast is about speaking with people who are grief counselors and death doulas, because that idea to so many people who are looking for stuff, that it all ends. So it's not the identity you're playing with here is not the whole shebang. And and that knowledge should inform, I would hope, your manifestations, that it's something to play with. Like, you get the Ferrari, it's part of having the human experience. You are here to have that human experience, and some of that human experience could be driving that nice Italian car, but it's not the whole purpose for you being here. It's not going to be the meaning of your life whenever this one ends. So that's just me preaching, I guess, for no reason.
Well, you can
I
preach for no reason, but conversely, I would say that I'm an atheist. I have no belief in anything beyond the present moment, and that's okay too. I know that by being of service, by caring, it makes me feel good. That's all I need. And the reality is, you have these people chase after wealth, they die. And it's always fascinating to see the centimillionaires and the billionaire class now running after longevity. And it's a joke. I mean, first of all, to be bluntly frank with you, who gives a whether this elite, self-absorbed group of people live longer than the normal lifespan, because many of them are just twits. They're doing nothing to improve society. So what is their purpose in this world other than to continue being a dick? So I think that is my take on some of this.
I'm hoping the donors at Stanford, I'm thinking some of those people give money to Stanford.
Well, look, if they want to judge me, that's fine. But the reality is, if that's their mindset, they're not going to give it to me joke, anyway. Jim. No. I know, but you're right. I mean, I've had people get really mad at me because I call them to their face what they are.
You actually travel in the circles of the people who are like that, so that's what I'm saying. They must love you at the cocktail party.
Well, here's the thing, the secret.
I'm glad you're in the room, though.
Yeah.
I am glad you're there.
The secret is I don't give a they don't need to like me or dislike me. I'm who I am. I don't talk behind their back, and it is what it is. And if you don't like it, don't like me. That's okay. I'll survive.
I have to say, I'm with you only because there's a part of life as I get older, and I've had medical issues where it's like, what would I want to do with 100 more years? It's like, it's okay to have experienced what you experience and then have that end. But anyway,
well, that's exactly right. It's what is the purpose? Now, I could argue, I mean, yes, I'd like to live another 60 years so that I can distribute my wealth and make the life of many people in this world better. Hey, dude, I'm all for you, man. I think that's a great. But
yeah, you and I were supposed to speak a couple of weeks ago, but you were in Riyadh for an AI conference. This I have to ask you about, because when we're talking about where we're putting our attention and how to rewire our subconscious, Silicon Valley and the people working on AI have already figured out pretty well how to move people's attention. And it doesn't seem to be in a area towards compassion and bon ami. So what happened at the conference? What were you doing at the conference? Did they listen to anything you said?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think there is a subset of people who are interested in doing the right thing relative to AI, and AI is not going to go away. Unfortunately, in our culture here in Silicon Valley, oftentimes, unlike in the days of Hewlett and Packard, who were building things to be of service and to help, we have a narrative now, which is how can I maximize profit? And whether that results in me going to the most base level to do so, that's okay. And it's sort of surprising that they haven't completely embraced porn, although I bet you there are a lot of venture capitalists who are secretly doing that because that's highly profitable.
And that's usually how the media has evolved. I mean, I come from the entertainment industry. That's how the VHS industry took off. So, and then DVD.
Exactly. I mean,
the internet.
They have the greatest technology to promote porn, whether it's compressing videos or actually sales tactics, et cetera, et cetera. But getting back to your query, the reason I was in Riyadh was for an AI conference, because for the last 2.5 years, I have been actually creating a AI-based mental health app to help people who are affected by living in the modern world, which results in stress, anxiety, loneliness, and depression. So what I have done is created and I say a team of people, but I'll take all the credit. A team of people.
Does it have your name on it?
No, but it's called Happy, HAPPI.ai. So the happy word now has AI in it, so HAPPI.ai. But what it does is it has an emotion assessment engine using sentiment analysis, voice analysis, facial analysis to constantly determine your emotional state. And it's combined with a proprietary conversational AI knowledge base of compassion-focused therapy cognitive behavioral therapy, and psychology, which is then connected to a human-like avatar. And the advantage of this is, one, uh, therapy is not available to everyone for a variety of reasons. One, the number of therapists. Two, the cost. And the third is that you can't get a hold of a therapist after 5 p.m. or on the weekend. Yet, most of us who have stress and anxiety, it occurs after hours when we're not distracted. So, by having a avatar that is human-like, that you can talk to, that's non-judgmental, that's supportive, that is compassionate, that is an empathic listener, this is what most people need. They don't need therapy. They need somebody simply to listen to them. And surveys have shown, because of the judgment issue, that many people prefer not to talk to a human being. And whether we like it or not, and we're talking about subconscious versus conscious, even though on a conscious level, you know it's an avatar and it's not real, on a subconscious level, you cannot help but to have an emotional connection to it. And so by being able to speak with an avatar 24/7 and just have a conversation, but also it can offer you guided meditations, breathing exercises, yoga, and all sorts of other things. It's very helpful for people. We did a study and it showed that 70% of people out of a 1 to 5 scale, using it a minimum of 10 minutes a day for 1 week, had a 2-level improvement in all of those categories, which is quite profound. And it's fairly sticky, which is one of the problems with a lot of these different apps. So I'm hopeful that that will have an impact here in the future. But that's what I was talking about at the AI conference, as well as how to rethink how universities are designed in regard to utilizing AI to improve the lives of students.
Did you have a decent reception
Yeah,
for
no,
those ideas?
yeah, of course. There's a lot, whether it's, and there were 30,000 people there. I mean, it's a lot of people. But listen, I think everyone recognizes that there's an epidemic of stress, anxiety, depression, loneliness. Of course, we've had the U.S. Surgeon General and the California Surgeon General speak about this. And we're looking for tools to how to deal with it. I've mentioned to you why this is the case. And so I think that it can have a profound impact. And the thing is, what's interesting is that it's able to seamlessly speak in a variety of different languages, and you can create avatars that resonate with you, whether it's on the basis of culture, religion, appearance, sexuality, whatever you want. So here you have this unlimited ability to find a avatar that you feel comfortable with. And this is one of the problems too with a therapist. I mean, you end up spending so much time listen, I've been through therapy multiple times myself over many years. But you may pick somebody and go, God, that's not the right person. They don't resonate with me. Then you have to start over with somebody else. Then you have to start over with somebody else. Versus in this way, you can pick a person who's younger, older, firm in terms of their response versus more sympathetic, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we haven't created all of these yet, but ultimately that's the goal, is to give people the ability to choose something that resonates with them. Because as you know, uh, walking into a room, if you have somebody like Ruth who's open and engaging versus a person who, for whatever reason, you don't have a connection to, it makes a huge difference in terms of how you respond to somebody.
Yeah. I'm going to hit you with the last questions, the lightning round of questions. What does a well lived life look like to you?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. And look, everybody in this world is not meant to be a Albert Einstein or a Mother Teresa or whatever icon you wish, Archbishop Tutu, Thich Nhat Hanh, etc. if you can live a life that within your environment, whether it's with your family, people close to you, your community, and you've lived a life where you have been helpful to others, looked out for others, then that is a well lived life.
What do you suspect is the true nature of reality, if you have any suspicions?
Well, I think the true nature of reality is love. Uh, and if you look at how every aspect of life responds, it's when the environment is created, which is always associated with caring, connecting, and whether and that goes through all aspects of life. Now, obviously, it evolves in different ways, but you look at some of the interactions of animals, and they're just profound, where another cares for another, and sometimes even not the same species.
Mm.
So, while we may think love is only related to the human species, it goes deep, 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 deep.
Mm. In addition to what we were discussing about rewiring your brain, how should people take care to be connected to their heart
Well,
or
we
the
could go
love?
into
Mhm.
we could go into a long discussion about
You got
that.
another hour for this wrap up question?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that one, it's hard to stay connected with your heart where you're fearful and stressed. So, creating a practice such as a meditation practice, a mindfulness practice that helps you deal with that stress and deal with the negative self talk, I think is important. The practice that I personally do every day is that I wake up and I sit by the side of my bed. I do a breathing exercises, which I'm sure many of your listeners know will put you into the right mindset, because the very nature of that breathing exercises shifts you into stimulation of your parasympathetic nervous system. So it calms you down. Then I think of the joy and awe of being in this world. And then I go through 10 letters of the alphabet. And the reason I mention this is I was asked to speak at the graduation, or excuse me, at the white coat ceremony of an incoming group of medical students at actually my medical school. And I wanted to give them something that they could use to center themselves. And of course, medical students have to learn a lot of information. So I put in the context of a mnemonic, which was 10 letters of the alphabet. And so that's what I go through every day, which is C, compassion for self and others. D, recognizing the dignity of every person. E, practicing equanimity or evenness of temperament, or as we were talking about with Viktor Frankl, the pause. F is forgiveness. G is gratitude. H, which is very hard for a neurosurgeon, humility. I, integrity or values that bound your behavior. J is justice, and I mean that in the context of our responsibility for caring for those who are vulnerable. K is kindness, just simply caring for others, regardless of whether they're suffering. And all of this is contained by love. That is my practice.
Um, you're an atheist, but I'm going to ask anyway. Is there anything in particular? I am also, I am not, I was raised Catholic. I am no longer Catholic, but um, so we all have our path. Is there anything that you hope to find when you die? That's why I preface that.
Uh, it doesn't matter. First of all, I won't be there in the sense that I'm not going to remember it. If there's something does happen, at least there's no evidence to that to date that anyone has come back and told us how great the afterlife is. And who cares? I'm living this life and doing the best I can. Anything after the fact, that's a different conversation. And it's one which you and I will not be present for. There may be some particles of stardust that may be having that interaction, but you and I won't be having that interaction.
Yes. And we've mentioned happy AI. You have a compassion center. Where can people find you? They can find your books on Amazon. So I'll just put that there. Where else can they find like the compassion center and what else you're working on?
Sure. Well, first of all, I would say don't use Amazon. Use bookshop.org, which promotes independent booksellers, or go to the library so you don't have to spend any money. The next thing is you can find the work I do at Stanford at the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. That's CCARE, CCARE.stanford.edu. And you can find sort of my work bundled up at jamesrdotymd.com. So there you have more information about me than probably wish you ever had. I appreciate your time, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And thank you for your superpower of being willing to speak to anyone. I feel very grateful as a beneficiary today.
Well, I would just comment. Let me make two comments. One is some of the greatest knowledge and wisdom I've received are from people who are from the most humble of circumstance. So never discount anyone or the knowledge you can get from somebody because it's not necessarily about book learning. The other is that each and every one of us, regardless of our circumstance, has the ability to improve the life of at least one other person. And whether that's by saying hello, by giving somebody a hug, by sharing a meal with somebody, we each have that. And if you do that, your day is going to be better.
Thanks for watching. Click to join us on another journey, and don't forget to subscribe.